They called them holy men, keepers of cosmic order, guardians of divine balance, mediators between mortals and the gods. But in ancient Egypt, power did not always wear the face it claimed. Sometimes it hid in shadows, darker than the night sky over the Nile. Sometimes the most sacred titles concealed the most profane desires, and sometimes the ones meant to protect the innocent were the very architects of their suffering. Imagine a temple sealed from the world, its walls carved with hymns to purity, its corridors echoing with the soft steps of girls, too young to understand what had been taken from them. They were called virgins of the house, chosen not by God but by men, offered not to divinity but to the appetites of those who controlled it. Their lives were illusions, presented to the people as living symbols of untouched holiness, yet behind the stone doors they lived under a dominion so absolute that even silence became a form of obedience. The title, "The Unholy Acts of Egyptian Priests Against Temple Virgins," is not merely a historical statement. It is a psychological threat, a reminder that in every civilization, the greatest atrocities often hide behind sacred language. Unholy acts suggests blasphemy performed under the guise of devotion. Egyptian priests evokes power disguised as wisdom. And temple virgins, that final phrase, carries the weight of innocence crushed by ritual, hierarchy, and the hunger of men who believe themselves untouchable. This story is not found in school books. It is carved in whispers, buried in translated papyri, hinted at by Greek historians, terrified to reveal too much, and hidden behind the sanitized image of Egyptian spirituality taught in modern culture. Because the truth is simple: when men are granted divine authority without accountability, their darkness becomes sanctified. Picture the first night a young girl is led to the inner chamber. The torches burn with sweet resin, incense curls like a serpent toward the ceiling, and the priest, draped in immaculate linen, steps forward without hesitation, because the institution has already absolved him. She is told to remain still. She is told the gods are watching. What she does not know is that no god in that chamber is looking at her, only men. And history remembers what men choose to hide. The deeper you step into this forgotten world, the more the facade of holiness begins to fracture. Egyptian temples were not simply places of worship. They were sovereign kingdoms within a kingdom, untouched by pharaohs, protected by superstition, and ruled entirely by priestly elites who answered to no one. Inside their stone citadels, the priests did not serve the gods, they became them. To the common people outside, these priests were embodiments of Ma'at, cosmic order, balance, justice. Their shaved heads symbolized purity. Their white linen garments represented moral clarity. Their rituals were believed to sustain the sun itself. But purity is clothing, and clothing can be removed. What remained underneath was human desire sharpened by absolute power, a combination that has destroyed innocence since the beginning of civilization. Not every temple practiced the rites you're about to hear. Only the ones large enough, wealthy enough, and influential enough to hide their sins behind layers of ceremony, threat, and theological justification. Some of these accounts come from fragments preserved by foreign writers. Herodotus hinting at rituals not fit for the ears of the uninitiated. Diodorus Siculus describing secret chambers and forbidden rites, and later Greek priests accusing the Egyptians of corrupting the maidens offered to their gods. Yet even these accusations are restrained, as though the truth was too dangerous to write openly. Imagine a girl chosen at birth. Her mother believes she is blessed. Her father is told her life will be protected by the gods. She is raised with the promise that she belongs to something sacred. But at 12, 13, 14, she is taken deeper into the temple, past the outer courts, past the audience halls, past the sanctuaries where even high officials must bow. There, in a chamber kept forever dim, she is told the truth. Her body is not her own. Her purity is currency. Her silence is obedience, and obedience is survival. The priests spoke with gentle tones, as though cruelty delivered softly became compassion. They told her she was chosen for a divine purpose. They told her the gods demanded closeness, intimacy, submission. But the gods were not present. The only presence in that room was the quiet, practiced ritual of exploitation. A ritual older than any inscription, older than any dynasty, older even than the myths carved on temple walls. And outside, the people continued to believe in holiness. Inside these temples, the abuse did not always take the form of violence. Sometimes it was far more insidious. It was psychological, ritualized, wrapped in symbolism, so ancient and complex that even the victims could not distinguish devotion from violation. That is what made the system terrifying. It was engineered to make obedience feel like destiny. The priests understood this better than anyone. They were scholars of the human mind long before the world invented the word psychology. They knew how to break a girl without ever raising a hand. They knew how to reshape her identity using myths, chants, sacred roles, and the crushing weight of divine expectation. After all, if a priest told her the gods desired her, who was she to question divinity? Some temples recorded what they called nights of union, described in vague, poetic hieroglyphs that modern scholars often sanitize, mistranslate, or dismiss as metaphor. But ancient commentators, those few brave enough to speak, knew better. They wrote of the initiation of maidens, of ritual acts behind sealed walls, of the first night given to the priests before it belongs to the gods. Even the wording reveals the hierarchy. The girl was not regarded as a person, only as an offering processed through the hands of men. And these priests were not mere religious servants. They were kings within their own walls. Their wealth was incalculable. Their archives held secrets forbidden to the public. Their rites could command fear, devotion, and unquestioning obedience. Pharaohs themselves negotiated with them carefully. So imagine the mindset of a man raised from childhood to believe he was the earthly voice of Horus or Amun or Osiris. Imagine him standing over a girl who has been told her body is a sacred vessel. In that moment, every boundary collapses, every abuse becomes justified, every sin becomes ritual. Some girls did try to resist. The records mention punishments, disguised as purification, cold water baths in winter, days of silence enforced by isolation, fasting periods passed off as spiritual cleansing. If resistance continued, she was declared unfit for divine service and replaced. But she was never allowed to return home. What she had witnessed was too dangerous, too compromising, too revealing of the real mechanisms of temple power. The temple took everything, and the world outside remained blind, convinced that the priests were the purest guardians of the divine. And so the story of the temple virgins ends not with liberation, but with erasure. Their lives became whispers, their names forgotten, their suffering encoded only in the shadows of stone walls, in the cracks of hieroglyphs, and in the faint, lingering echoes of incense. They were invisible to the world outside, yet their torment shaped every corner of the temple, every ritual, every priestly claim to divinity. Some priests left records of their acts, inscriptions meant to celebrate devotion to the gods. But when read between the lines, they reveal a darker truth, a system built on fear, manipulation, and the exploitation of innocence. Others remained entirely silent, as if the very act of recording would invoke the wrath of powers they themselves pretended to serve. It was an empire within an empire, a shadow of religion masquerading as sanctity. And history is complicit. For centuries, scribes and scholars chose the sanitized versions. They carved pyramids of myth over the foundations of truth. They painted pharaohs as enlightened, priesthoods as holy, temples as sacred, leaving the hidden darkness to dissolve into rumour, myth, and half-truths. Yet every once in a while, the silence cracks. A fragment of papyrus, a Greek observer's account, a misinterpreted chant in the margins. These are the traces of what really occurred, the evidence that even the most revered institutions can harbour the most forbidden sins. So what can we learn from this? The story of the temple virgins is more than historical horror. It is a meditation on the nature of power, the fragility of innocence, and the capacity for cruelty hidden behind authority. The greatest atrocities often come not from chaos but from order, from men who wear divinity like a mask, from societies that revere ritual over humanity. And it is in these shadows that we find the most chilling truths, that those who promise protection can become predators, that holiness can be a weapon, and that silence is the accomplice of every crime. As you leave this story, carry with you the weight of what was hidden. The gods may have been witnesses, but they did not intervene. The people may have believed, but they did not see. And the priests, those men entrusted with divine power, acted with impunity. Remember this: history is rarely as pure as it is told. Often the deepest truths are buried beneath sanctity, behind walls of stone, behind words of devotion, behind faces we are told to trust. And sometimes the darkness of the past is still whispering.